All right, folks, here we go. One question for each game, starting with Pittsburgh at Baltimore. Start or sit Zay Flowers.
High-end number 3 receiver. You know, he's been a little unlucky. Did score a touchdown last time these two teams met, but under 12 PPR points now for ever since the Broncos game, which I believe was week 6 or 7. It's been a pretty long time since we've seen him have a monster game. So if you look at what the Steelers have allowed the last couple of weeks, there's been a lot of big games to wide receivers, but that's Jamar Chase. That's the two Eagles guys. You know, Flowers has just been overshadowed a little bit by Rashad Bateman scoring touchdowns, Mark Andrews scoring touchdowns. So I think you're clearly starting him in 3 receiver leagues. You've probably been doing so all along. I would start him over Jerry Jeudy, for example.
I would start him over Jerry Jeudy. I'm not sure if I've got that currently, but that's the way I'll end up. Yeah, he's like the very top of the I don't love my wide receiver, so I'm going to start this guy.
Zay Flowers has not had a single game with anywhere between 12 and 18.4 PPR fantasy points per game. He is either below 12 or 18.5 or more. That makes him a consistent tough call. Very strange. Houston at Kansas City. Who are some guys you would start over Joe Mixon, who has the toughest matchup in fantasy and has been horrible in tough matchups? Who are some guys you'd start over Joe Mixon?
Saquon, Jacobs, Gibbs, and Chase Brown.
Wow. You have him 5th? Woo, okay.
Jamey, I'm a little bit lower, but it's basically just all the must-start guys. Like, he's just one of those guys you just can't sit at this point. Unless you like, I love Bucky Irving this week. I'm not doing that.
Why? Like,
I might move Bijan ahead of him.
You don't have Bijan Robinson ahead of Joe Mixon? Are you kidding? How? But like, he's Bijan.
He's Joe Mixon.
Yeah, but like, he was terrible last week against the Dolphins. He was terrible against the Titans. He was good one time against another tough run defense. And by the way, he was terrible last week with like 4 catches because he does get 4 to 6 targets every week now. Which
he had 5 catches.
And he was still terrible.
I think the concern.
He's hurt.
The concern for me is not so much the matchup, as daunting as it is. Is he healthy?
That's right. All right, Heath, come on. Any bet in the world, Bijan versus Mixon.
I just said I might move I didn't take a hard stance at all.
All right, fine. It is tough with the state of running back. It is tough to sit Joe Mixon.
I don't want to sit Joe Mixon. He's probably going to touch the ball 20 times.
All right, Rams are at the Jets. Rank the wide receivers. I'll start. Puka Nacua 1. Now rank the rest.
Adams 2, Kupp 3, Wilson 4.
Yep, and full PPR.
Adams, Kupp, Wilson. You said okay.
I'd go Wilson ahead of Kupp.
We haven't heard it, but I'm sure there's a squeaky wheel game coming for Cooper Kupp.
San Francisco's at Miami. Tyreek Hill or Juwan Jennings?
I'm still Tyreek.
It's Jennings for me.
Okay. Cleveland at Cincinnati. Is it start 'em all, sit 'em all?
No, Jerome Ford's decent start.
Jerome Ford is a number 2 running back.
How do you feel about Njoku if he plays?
He'd be a low-end tight end 1. He'd be right around where I have Andrews.
Yeah, he'd be behind Andrews for me, but he'd probably be in the top 12.
Tennessee's at Indianapolis. Are there any must-start players in this game?
Jonathan Taylor and Tony Pollard if he gets in any semblance of full practice. You're probably still starting him anyway, though.
Okay. So last week, I mean, I kind of view this matchup similar to last week's for Jonathan Taylor. And I know I don't know if Heath was, but I know you and I, Jamey, were apprehensive about Taylor and ended up being right, I guess, because of the fumble, but ended up being wrong because he should have had 18 points in that game. But I mean, still a good run defense and a guy who, if we're lucky, is going to catch 1 pass, basically.
It's back-to-back weeks with over 20 carries. I don't think the Titans, despite the quarterback change, are running away from the Colts. I think you kind of know what you're getting. And what we've seen from the Titans the last 2 games is Chase Brown ran well against them. Brian Robinson ran well against them. So Jonathan Taylor, especially if Ryan Kelly plays, and I'm sure he's pissed and motivated, especially after what he said following the game. Like, I'm not worried about Josh.
All right. New England at Buffalo. Who's a better flex? I'm going to give you 2 questions for each of these last 2 games. Ramondre Stevenson or Khalil Shakir?
Shakir and PPR.
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, he's so locked in right now. It's like 8 straight games of 7+ targets. It's back-to-back weeks with a touchdown. It's like 15 PPR points or more in 3 of his last 4. He's the guy. He's Josh Allen's guy.
Dalton Kincaid or Hunter Henry?
Kincaid for me. I think we saw it a little bit last week. 7 targets in his first game back. He's got a pretty nice track record, which is, saying something for him because he's been a disappointment. But he's got 5 games this season with 7 targets. 4 of those, he's been 9.3 PPR points or more. So, as we know, that's a borderline starter. Henry has been disappointing the last couple of games, and the Bills, despite what Sam Laporta did last week, have been fantastic against tight ends. So I think Henry's going to be in a little bit of trouble. I downgraded him a little bit this week.
I'll go with Henry. Like this would be a good place to implement the tiebreaker if you want to, for just like the number of points the teams are supposed to score. But neither one of these tight ends score touchdowns or really see targets in the end zone. I like those games where Kincaid's had 7 or more targets. He's had 53, 32, 51, 47 yards. He's just been bad.
He only played like half the snaps last week. But I did have a stat on Hunter Henry I wanted to give. I'm calling it the comforting stat of the game.
Well, he only played half the snaps because, I mean, they were just blowing out the team they played.
They were.
It's a boring game.
Yeah. Hunter Henry's had 2 bad games since week 7. In those 2 games, Drake May threw 25 passes and 23 passes, including last week. 25 passes at Chicago in an easy win. 23 passes last week at Arizona, which was weird as they were losing, but I think they didn't have the ball much. But whenever he's had a normal game, Drake May, 30 or more pass attempts, Hunter Henry scored 9.4 or more PPR fantasy points. So that put me at ease a little bit with Hunter Henry. Not saying, I think he's close with Kincaid, but if you have Henry and, want to be encouraged, there's that. Jacksonville's at Las Vegas. Are we going right back to Jacoby Myers?
Yes.
If Aiden O'Connell's playing, absolutely, 100% for sure.
Would you start Jacoby Myers over Garrett Wilson if O'Connell's playing? You would.
Yeah.
Okay. And then let's spend a little bit of time on this because it's our last game and 2 of the most popular waiver wire players who, speaking about the Raiders guys, but who is your favorite running back in the Jacksonville-Las Vegas game?
Travis Etienne.
Alexander Madison.
Okay. And they are ranked where?
Etienne is like 23 and Madison is like 26.
I've got Madison at 24.
Okay. So borderline starts. All right. We'll talk more about that. I call that the movable object versus the stoppable force, with the movable object being Jacksonville's run defense and the stoppable force being the Raiders running backs.
It could be both teams, couldn't it? It's 2.
Yeah.
The only difference is, and I don't know if this has shown up in the stats or not, but I do think the Raiders defense, especially their front, has been playing a lot better.
Interesting. They don't have Crosby now, but if we're just talking about against the run, interesting. Yeah. It's just like the Tennessee-Indianapolis game, the Jacksonville-Las Vegas game, there's some really good matchups there, but players we don't necessarily want to trust. One question for each game. Philadelphia is at Washington. It was a bad game for the Commanders last time they met. Are you guys starting your Washington Commanders, Dave Richard?
Yes, I am starting Jaden Daniels. I am starting Terry McLaurin. If he's cleared from the concussion protocol, I am starting Zach Ertz. That's probably about it. Maybe start Brian Robinson if I'm really stuck at running back. Jerome Ford's an easy start for me ahead of Brian Robinson, for example. And that's really it. The Commanders DST, you might have put them in your lineup last week. You were probably disappointed with the end results. you definitely should put them right back on the waiver wire.
Another game of the week, yeah! The Commanders and the Eagles. It's going to be a good one, I've decided now. Because it's the game of the week. Hey!
Wasn't yesterday your game of the week?
No. I had, what did I have
Dolphins,
for the game of the week?
Oh, Dolphins 49ers is the one.
I couldn't do that. I just couldn't do that. And you know what?
We're taking back Dolphins Niners, and we're now giving it to Commanders Eagles.
Yeah, but I'm not. We might get another one before the show's over. I really hate this slate. I don't think there's a good game on it.
This is a great game.
This could be a really great game.
It wasn't last time. The Eagles were.
Yeah.
The Eagles are so much better than the Commanders, but
They are so much better than Commanders. But that was also Jaden Daniels still dealing with a rib injury then.
It was on a short week.
It's a big game. I'm excited for the Commanders. Like, imagine how the Commanders fans are feeling about this game. Anyway, Detroit is at Chicago. Jamey, how much faith do you? Oh, we have a lot of stats to break down when we get to this one. How much faith do you have in the Detroit passing game?
Not as much as I normally do. I mean, Goff outdoors, not great. Jameson Williams outdoors, not great. Sam Laporta, as Heath has brought up time and time again this week, has never scored a touchdown outdoors in 6 whopping games. So yeah, it's a little bit tough. It has nothing to do with the matchup. It just has to do with the ecosystem.
I love it. The ecosystem is great. Arizona at Carolina. Start or sit. I would call him a struggling Chuba Hubbard, Dave.
I'm still starting him. I would still expect a lot of work for him, and cross-country trip for the Cardinals could be a problem. Not ready to say that they've got to shut down run defense by any stretch. And who's taking Chuba off the field? Raheem Blackshear on some third downs would probably be the case.
Okay. Minnesota's at Seattle. How do you feel about TJ Hawkinson? We talked so much about Brenton Strange and Dalton Kincaid. And it's like, where's TJ Hawkinson, Jamey?
He's a low-end starter. I mean, the targets have been sort of hit or miss, which is the issue. Hasn't scored a touchdown since coming back yet. So, that's also a concern. It's a good matchup. I mean, Seattle has, been, one of the better teams in terms of having your tight end face against their defense for the majority of the season. They're top 15 in fantasy points allowed to the position. So it's just a matter of Darnold and what they want to do. As we've seen, frustratingly, there's been other tight ends that have scored touchdowns since Hawkinson has come back. But low-end starter, so I like him better than K. Dot, and like him better than Kyle Pitts, like him better than Okonkwo, who we talked about as a free agent. I would have started him over Stone Smart after Hayden Hurst was activated yesterday. So, low-end number one guy.
All right, and Hawkinson or over Ferguson?
Hawkinson over Ferguson.
He does not have a green zone target since returning, and only 2 end zone targets. So that has been the issue. No touchdowns, as Jamey said.
We're also getting to the year.
Hawkinson.
We're also getting to the year mark of his recovery. So hopefully things start to get better from that point. His injury, excuse me.
His injury. Yeah, happy anniversary. Tampa Bay is at Dallas. So I know Jamey loves Bucky Irving. Jamey, or Dave rather, Rashad White, or actually both of you. Rashad White or Rico Dowdle?
Dowdle will get more touches. We've seen Rashad White's catches go down over the past few weeks, and he's no longer the lock to play at the goal line. What the hell happened?
You missed the button.
I was going to do like a fake game of the week. I was just going to play the music very briefly, but I once again, for the second time this week, I hit the buzzer instead of the game of the week. I'm sorry. I've had a rough week. All right.
Killing the bit is what you're doing.
am. I'm killing everything. I got too sick.
Is your mixer labeled?
No. Yes, but I can't see the labels. They're too far away.
You can't see the labels.
They're not on the buttons.
So each time you press a sound effect, you're not sure.
No, I'm trying to remember
what you're pressing, but they're not. You don't know.
You've been using that same thing for years, right?
Yeah. All right. Sorry.
Which?
Rashad White or Rico Dowdle, Jamey?
Dowdle.
All right. New Orleans is at Green Bay. Anybody want to start a Packers wide receiver?
Not if I don't have to.
Just kidding. Who's your favorite one?
Still Jaden Reed.
I'll take Dobbs.
Giants are at the Falcons. Which wide receivers do you trust this week in this Falcons-Giants game?
Neighbors in London.
There's Neighbors. There's London. And I don't mind Mooney
Same.
as a high-end wide receiver 3, just because I know what Michael Penix is, or what I think he'll be anyway. Just like a downfield thrower. Like when he hits the panic button because of pressure, he's throwing downfield. I just don't know how much he's going to have to throw. But I would be surprised if Mooney had 1 or 2 catches of 15+ yards in this game. And hopefully one of them goes a long distance for a touchdown. Maybe he gets involved in the red zone. But he's definitely in the flex range. I would much rather start London and Neighbors. Neighbors has averaged around 15 PPR points in 2 games with Drew Lock. That's not so terrible.
Yeah, I'm starting Neighbors over London in PPR. I'd start London over Neighbors in the other format, just because the touchdowns are hard to come by. It's such a great matchup. I mean, the Falcons secondary has been awful. And so Neighbors is, he's going to get targets. I like that he's off the injury report, which is, positive. He hasn't had that. Hopefully he stays off Friday, because we've had some of these Friday, groin injuries or hamstring problems that have popped up for him. So I still think he's the best receiver in this game. But I would not be surprised if exactly what Dave said about Mooney and maybe Kyle Pitts, we're going to get surprised by something from Penix. So there's going to be a wrinkle that we probably have not expected. And watch Pitts get 7-8 targets and have a big game. Wouldn't surprise me.
Could you name some tight ends? Like, for example, I'm ready to take the chance on Kyle Pitts over Cade Otton.
Yeah. I started over Otton. I started over Ferguson. I'm not there yet with Hawkinson just because I like the matchup for Hawkinson.
Yeah, right. And I like Ferguson better than you. What, Freiermuth? I'm thinking.
No, with Pickens out, I like Freiermuth better.
Yeah, I do too.
But this is one I'm playing in one league against Pitts. I picked up Brenton Strange as to block my opponent from picking up Strange, and I'm like, this is gonna be one of those weeks where Pitts just goes nuts.
So the thing is, you got to be careful with starting players, and it's so weird. You got to be careful starting players against the Giants, but there's been 2 tight ends with more than 5 targets against the Giants. There's been 1 wide receiver all year with more than 8 targets against the Giants. Just nobody throws on them. 28.4 pass attempts per game against. That's what that's what opponents average against the Giants. That's the lowest in football, tied with the Commanders.
That's the other part of this, is that while they want to get Penix going, clearly, if he's going to be their guy, especially if they're comfortable and confident that they're going to make a playoff run, which they should be, they're in the mix. That do they allow him to throw the ball 30+ times, or is this go manage the game? We got to get the win. That's the most important thing, and just let Bijan and Tyler Algier carry us home. And I would not be surprised if that's the case also. If it's an 18 pass attempt game for Penix, and then we're screwed all the way around.
Yeah, it feels like a 26 or something. 18,
yeah.
You can never.
Anybody that's asked me, I say expect 25 to 30 pass attempts.
All right, Phil, how many people have asked you that?
You'd be surprised.
I've gotten texts from people I haven't spoken to in a long time this week.
Yeah.
Coming out of the woodwork.